Hello everybody! It's time for chapter 2 of The Best Bad Thing, and it's by Yoshiko Uchida. So as you recall in chapter 1, Rinko is our main character. She's an 11-year-old girl, and she has a little brother named Joji and a big brother named Ken. In this story, Ken isn't around. He went off for the summer up to Alaska to work on a salmon fishing boat. But Joji's there, and she lives with her mother and father and Joji right now, and they went to visit Mrs. Hata. Mrs. Hata lives at the end of East Oakland with her two boys, Zenny and Abu. They have a cucumber farm, but her husband, Mr. Hata, died 49 days ago. And so poor Mrs. Hata is struggling to survive with her boys. Chapter 2. As things turned out that Sunday, we didn't get home until almost supper time, because right after we ate Mama's lunch in Mrs. Hata's kitchen, we all went out in the fields to help pick cucumbers. Actually, it wasn't as easy as I thought it would be. The cucumbers weren't staked. They were just sprawling on the ground. So we had to crawl on our hands and knees to find the ones ready for picking. I put the ones I picked in a basket, and when my basket was full, I emptied it on the sorting table. It wasn't really a table. It was a stand that Mr. Hata had built with dividers, so the cucumbers could be separated by size into ones, twos, threes, and the crooked ones. We all spread out in the fields, and I could see Joji and Zenny and Abu horsing around, using the cucumbers for guns and banging at each other. "Hey!" I yelled at them. "Get to work!" But they didn't pay the slightest attention to me. I could have been talking to a basket full of cucumbers. Papa piled a dozen burlap sacks full of cucumbers on the back of Mrs. Hata's truck so she could take them to the factory first thing in the morning. She kept thanking Papa, saying, "Mr. Hata and I are so grateful," as though her husband was still alive. My friend Tammy was right, I thought to myself. She is crazy. By the time we got home, Mama was too tired to cook, so we just had some cold leftover rice with canned tuna. I was still hungry when we finished eating, but what Mama said made me forget everything, even my half-empty stomach. Whenever Mama has something important to say, she usually says it when we're all sitting down together for supper. Sometimes she'll blurt it out right after she says grace, which is a shorter version of the long, rambling conversation she has with God every night. But other times she'll wait until Papa has had the bowl of rice with hot tea and pickles that he has at the end of every meal. Like the time she announced she wanted to start a home laundry to help Papa pay his bills. I was flabbergasted when Mama came up with that idea, and now she flabbergasted me again. "I've been thinking," she said, and she pushed some stray hair into the bun at the back of her neck, the way she does when she's not quite sure how to say what she wants to say. Here it comes, I thought. Now Mama's going to say she wants to go help Mrs. Hata for a while. And I was all ready to say I'd take care of everything at home while she was gone. But I couldn't have been more mistaken. She wanted to help Mrs. Hata, all right, but she wasn't the one who would be going to East Oakland. It was me she wanted to ship off for the rest of the summer. "You still have another month of summer vacation, Rinko," Mama said. "And you saw how much help Mrs. Hata needs, not just in the fields, but with the housework, too." Well, I saw all right, but I certainly didn't want to volunteer to go help her. Just having you there would be a comfort to her, Mama added. And she gave my hand a little pat, as though to make sure I knew what a great comfort I was to her, too. I thought you'd be the one to go, I said lamely. But Mama said she couldn't possibly leave us to fend for ourselves and run the laundry, too. I could manage, I offered. I know I could. But Mama said that was out of the question. There's a lot more to running the house and the laundry than you think, Rinko. But who'll empty the water pan under the icebox if I go? Who'll feed the chickens and collect the eggs? And iron the pillowcases and clean the house on Saturdays, I asked, ticking off my chores one by one. When Mama said Joji could do all that, I saw I needed to be more direct. Well, I don't want to go, I said. Not even for 1 month? No, Mama, I really don't want to. I certainly didn't want to go live in that spooky old house with those 2 pesky boys. That would be like having 2 Jojis in my hair all day. Besides, everybody says Mrs. Hata is a little crazy, I said, trying a new tack. They say she got that way after she lost her second baby girl. I knew her first little girl died of diphtheria when she was 2. And the other one died of scarlet fever when she was only a tiny baby. I guess that would be enough to make anybody a little crazy. Until then, Papa had just been sitting there, leaning back in his chair, stroking his mustache, and listening to Mama and me carry on. But the minute he heard what I said about Mrs. Hata, he got into the discussion. Rinko, he said, there is nothing wrong with Mrs. Hata. She may be a little eccentric, but she is not crazy. And the way he said it, I knew he was disappointed in me for repeating idle gossip. They don't even have a phone, I said, beginning to feel desperate. How can I call home or Tammy? I'd forgotten I was mad at her. I'll go then, Joji suddenly piped up, and for once I thought he had a bright idea. Well, swell, I said, let's let Joji go. I started to leave the table to show I considered the discussion ended, but Papa wasn't finished with me yet. She needs someone she can depend on, Rinko, he said, and Mama immediately agreed with him. The 2 of them are usually on the same side of an argument, except when Mama goes on about what's sinful and what's not. Then Papa usually sides with Joji or me. I honestly think Papa goes to church mainly to please Mama. He says God is just as much out in the park or the open fields as he is inside our dark, musty Japanese church. That's what I think, too. You're older and more responsible, Rinko, Mama said, knowing how to get to me. And what Mrs. Hata needs now is someone like a daughter she can talk to. She's lonely, Rinko, and needs company and comfort as much as help. What could I say when Mama and Papa said things like that? They made me feel it was my duty to go. Certainly I didn't want to get in trouble with anyone. I didn't want to get in trouble with God, who was Mama's personal friend. I guess Joji knew he didn't have a chance now. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and he got up from the table. Okay, Rink, you go then, he said, and he went banging off to his room. Well, can I come home in 2 weeks if I don't like it out there? I asked, beginning to cave in. Of course, Mama reassured me. I have the Ladies' Aid meeting next Sunday, but we'll be out the Sunday after that to see how you're getting along. When do I have to go? Papa said he'd drive me out on Wednesday morning, since that was usually a quiet day for his repair shop. "I'll bet Mrs. Hada will be surprised to see me," I said. But Mama only smiled. And I knew then she'd probably already told Mrs. Hada I'd be out to help her. I'd never been away from home before, except for the times I'd slept over at Tammy's house. But they didn't really count because that's like being at home. Except, of course, Tammy's mother with her bulging, overactive thyroid eyes really makes me nervous. She has to know everything about everybody, and she's always trying to squeeze some news from me about the people at church. Someday I think I'll tell her the minister ran off with the deacon's wife. That would really make her eyes bulge. I went through all the clothes in my closet and checked my drawers, trying to decide what to take. Not that I have so many possessions, but I felt as though I needed to take some familiar things so I wouldn't feel too lonely. I didn't want to admit it to anybody, but actually I was sort of scared about going to Mrs. Hada's. Well, not scared exactly, but uncomfortable. I really didn't know her all that well, because whenever we went to see her, I tried to avoid her as much as possible. I guess it was because of what people said about her. And now here I was about to go live with her for 2 weeks. It gave me the creeps. I decided to take a few Seaman mysteries to read, since I'd be miles from a library. And if I was going to live in a spooky house, I might as well read something scary and mysterious. I also packed my 5-year diary with the red leather cover and the tiny gold lock and key that Cal gave me last Christmas. Every night I write in it all the things that have happened to me that day. But whoever made the diary certainly wasn't very bright, because there are only 5 lines for each day. And who can possibly squeeze a whole day into a 1-inch space? What I do is spill into the space for next year, and sometimes even into the year after that and the year after that. Whenever I write in my diary, I usually lock the 3 doors of my room and hang my "Do Not Disturb" signs on them so no one will barge in from the hall or Mama and Papa's room or the back room where Joji and Cal sleep. It's a trial and tribulation to live in a room right smack in the middle of the house with everyone tramping through it to get to the phone or the bathroom. I just hoped I'd have a private room at Mrs. Hada's. Papa brought one of Mama's old suitcases up from the basement for me. It was a brown leather one with straps, which Mama had brought when she came from Japan to marry Papa. I looked at all the stuff I'd laid out on my bed, and I told Papa I might need another suitcase. "Oh, you're only staying for 1 month, you know," Papa said, smiling. But I guess he saw the forlorn look on my face and understood why I needed to take more than just my clothes and clean underwear. And he went back to the basement to look for another suitcase for me. Papa is very quick to understand how I feel, even if I can't find the words to tell him. He knows how to read my face, just the way Mama seems to be able to see inside my skull and know exactly what I'm thinking. I felt as though I were going 1,000 miles from home. I decided to forgive Tammy, and I called to tell her to write me every day. "You mean the mailman actually goes way out there?" she asked, making me feel worse than I already did. "Of course," I answered, even though I didn't remember seeing a mailbox anywhere. "Well, good luck," Tammy said, as though I'd be needing it. When I'd finished packing, I went next door to say goodbye to our neighbor, Mrs. Sugarman. Mrs. Sugar, which is what I call her, is also one of my best friends, even though she's a white lady and about 50 years older than I am. The funny thing is, I can tell her just about everything, even things I can't tell Mama or Papa or my big brother Cal. I told her once how miserable I felt when the white kids at school treated me as though I didn't exist. And she said, "Never you mind, Rinko. They're just stupid and don't know any better. You know something? I feel sorry for them being so stupid. That's what." And she gave me some hot cocoa and sugar cookies to make me feel better. "Isn't it awful?" I said, telling her about going to help Mrs. Hata. "It's the worst thing that's happened to me all summer." Mrs. Sugar didn't say how nice it was that I was going to do my Christian duty. She just said, why I'm going to miss you, Rinko." And she gave me a bag of cookies to take in case there weren't any at Mrs. Hata's. Early Wednesday morning, Papa put my 2 suitcases in the back seat of his car, and I was ready to leave for East Oakland. I felt the way I did the day Cal went off to Alaska. I absolutely hate goodbyes, even temporary ones, and I had to blink hard to keep from crying when Cal left. "What are you crying for, Rink?" Cal asked. "I'll be back by September." "I know," I said. But I didn't really. What if his ship hit an iceberg and sank? What if his foot got caught in the machinery at the cannery and he got mangled? What if he liked Alaska so much he didn't want to come home? I was doing it again. I was what-ifing. I gave Cal a hug, which I know he didn't like, and said, "You better come back, or I'm really going to be mad at you." I was mad at Mama now for shipping me off to East Oakland and for causing me to be separated from her and Papa and Joji and Mrs. Sugar. What if something happened to me and I never came back? Mama gave me a hug and a basket of fresh eggs to take to Mrs. Hata. Joji gave me a poke and said, "Lucky bum, you'll get to ride the freights." But lucky was the last thing I was feeling. What I felt was homesick, even before I left. Papa cranked up the motor, I climbed in the front seat, and we started off. It wasn't often I got to ride up front with Papa, because that's where Cal or Joji usually sat. In fact, it wasn't often that Papa and I went any place, just the 2 of us. He drove real fast since Mama wasn't in the back seat telling him to slow down. He was humming and acting as though we were on our way to a picnic. But the fog was coming in from San Francisco Bay, the way it does in the summer, and I felt as though it were creeping into my stomach and settling there all cold and clammy. Papa glanced sideways at me and said, "You'll enjoy yourself, Rinko. I think you'll like Mrs. Hata, too." I noticed he didn't mention the 2 boys. "You know," he added, "I think Mrs. Hata is the only Japanese woman I know who can drive a truck." I knew he was right. None of Mama's Japanese women friends would have dreamed of learning how to drive. In fact, not many Japanese families even owned cars. And when they did, it was always the father who drove. We wouldn't have had a car either if somebody hadn't sold Papa the old Model T for $30 and he'd fixed the engine himself. "Is she any good at driving that old truck you fixed up for Mr. Hata?" Papa nodded. "That lady's got a lot of gumption. You'll see." Maybe, just maybe, I thought, I could like a lady who drove a truck. And pretty soon I was singing, "Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain." Papa stuck out his chin, cleared his throat, and chimed in, "For purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain." We were both bellowing like a couple of moose when we got there. not to any fruited plains, but to Mrs. Hada's shabby old house. I took one look at it, and my spirits began to sink again. And that is the end of chapter 2. So in the next chapter, we'll find out what happens during her summertime with Mrs. Hada and her 2 boys, Zenny and Abu. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.